be giving us more details later on. But then to another developing story where Kenyans should brace themselves for a tough month ahead following the significant increase in fuel prices announced by the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority. Sunday, in the latest review, Super Petrol will retail at 115 shillings and 18 cents per litre, and that is an 8 shillings and 19 cents increase. Now, diesel at 101 and 91 cents, which represents 5 shillings and 51 cents a shillings. That is up by that, and of course, kerosene at 92 shillings and 44 cents in Nairobi, an increase of 5 shillings and 32 cents. Now, in Mombasa, petrol will retail at 112 shillings and 78 cents, diesel at 99 shillings and 52 cents, and 90 shillings and 5 cents for kerosene. Now, fuel prices will be highest in Mandera, where Super Petrol will retail at 128 shillings and 22 cents, diesel at 114 shillings and 95 cents, and kerosene at 105 shillings and 47 cents. Now, EPRA has attributed the rise in fuel prices to the increase in the average landed costs of the three products, as well as the appreciation of the US dollar to the Kenya shilling exchange rate by 0.5%. All right, so now, following the latest review, the Central Organization of Trade Unions, that is COTU Kenya, condemned EPRA for what it termed as outrageous and insensitive. In a statement to newsrooms, COTU said that the move to raise the fuel prices is an affront to workers and all Kenyans at a time when they're still reeling from the effects of COVID-19 pandemic. COTU also blamed cartels for the rise in the prices and warned that businesses in Kenya are on the brink of further collapse. COTU now wants the Energy Ministry to intervene in the matter to avert widespread protests. So now those are the new prices for fuel that took place effective midnight. You've heard it from the Central Organization of Trade Union Secretary General, and that is Mr. Francis Atwoli, just talking about the effects of this, what it will mean to the common man when it comes to the prices of commodities in the country. But I bring in my colleague Emmanuel To, who is supposed to be getting the sentiments of Kenyans from the Central Business District. Emmanuel To, good morning. So this means it's tough times ahead for Kenyans. What are they saying about the new fuel prices?
Absolutely. It is going to be a very tough terrain for Kenyans after the prices of those basic commodities are expected to rise because of the ripple effects that the petroleum products have on basic commodities in the country. And Kenyans already speaking, others are already complaining that the government is trying to siphon some money from them and make sure that, and maybe finance some of the projects. Remember that there's a 3 trillion shilling budget that has been reviewed by the government to make sure that for the next 1 year, that is the money that is going to come from Kenyans' pockets. And this is coming at the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, where many Kenyans have been jobless. Many of them are not having any money just to even finance their basic commodities in their day-to-day activities. So I'm joined by some of the Kenyans here on the streets of Nairobi just to give their sentiments and their reactions to the latest directive that has been given by EPRA. So kindly join us, start with your name and tell us your reactions to what you had, or maybe the news that you got recently about the prices of those commodities.
Oh, right. My name is Richard Harold. Okay, the EPRA information that I received it on Saturday. Was it Saturday or yesterday? Yesterday, yeah. Okay, when I look at that, it is going to tickle to every common man, that is the taxpayer, in one way or another. Starting from the bread, the commodities, the basic commodities that we use daily, that is sugar, bread, and then you find that still it is within our pockets. That is, we have to go back and recheck, because now the tax that is increased on fuel is always going to the producers, like the industries, the ones that produce the bread, so that when you are going to buy the bread, it's even approaching 60, because currently it's doing 55. Milk is 55. That is the common man if you want to have tea in the morning with bread.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you ready for these new changes that are coming?
Yes, these changes, I would say it's so unfortunate at this current time when COVID came. People have been laid off. The taxation have been returned to normal. So everything is just more or less, they are still hurting our pockets.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. Naomba nizungumze na wengine karibia hapa. Tuambie tu jina lako kwanza na maoni yako. Bei ya mafuta imepandishwa jana, na hiyo inamaanisha kwamba bei ya bidhaa muhimu ambayo unatumia kila siku itapanda. Maoni yako?
Kwa majina naitwa Athanasi Rukunga. Kwa maoni yangu mimi nauliza, hii mafuta inapanda, sina vikitu kuna mafuta hapa Turkana. Sasa inapandia nini mtu wangu? Ikipanda hivi maisha imekuwa ngumu. Unaona? Hakuna kazi. Fare magari ipande. Hapa mtu wangu mwananchi kawaida anaumia.
Okay. Sasa asante sana.
Okay.
Okay. Well, those are some of the sentiments from the streets of Nairobi concerning the latest report that we've received from EPRA, that the prices of those oil, prices of those commodities that are going to increase as a result of the latest directive are going to hurt the common mwananchi, and some of them are not prepared for the new changes, but they have to live with it now that the government has made that move. So that is the latest right now, and we're going to speak to some more Kenyans later on, and I hand it over to you in studio.
Emmanuel, too, thank you so much. So let me bring in Steve Ogola, who is an SME, Victor Ogola, sorry for that, Victor Ogola, who is an SME expert, just to pick his mind on what this means to the small businesses, business owners here in the country. And thank you so much for joining us here on KTN News Center. So high fuel prices, we need to brace ourselves for, these tough times that we're supposed to be facing as from today. Because as we speak, the price of bread right now, a loaf of bread is actually 55 shillings. So we expect, to have the price go higher than what it is now. But then my question is, Ogola, what does this mean to the SMEs here in the country, the high fuel prices?
Thank you very much for having me. I think I would have to agree with the sentiments that COTU has given out in terms of, really condemning this move. Because if you look at the wider SME environment, SMEs are struggling. In a natural environment, we had 3 out of 5 businesses closing within the first 3 years. And this was before Corona, the COVID-19 pandemic. So we've had, a mortality rate of over 80%. So it means that even almost theoretically 4 out of 5 businesses are closing due to COVID only. Now, if you are to add the new taxes that government has introduced, as well as consider that some of the stimulus package has been withdrawn. So the net effect of that combining with this fuel is very, is very appalling from an SME perspective.
Clearly, from your explanation, that means they'll pass this to the common mwananchi in terms of hiking the prices of commodities.
Yeah, so I think it's a dangerous, is basically walking on ice. Because already if you're looking at the SME market, the purchasing power of consumers has been weakened. And has been weakened by COVID, and now has been weakened by, or will be weakened by, the increase in fuel. So it means that even if SMEs were to increase their prices, chances are that because of a weakened disposable income of the consumer, there is a high likelihood that they might not sell. So unless we're talking about bread where, is essential, where the consumer would be forced to buy, there are SMEs in a variety of sectors, such as transport, food and accommodation, where the consumer might opt to look for an alternative to the detriment of the small business.
Mm-hmm. And Ogola, you talk about this means that the SMEs will not be able to sell. So are we looking at a possibility of closure?
I think that's the reality that we are in, especially coming from 2020, where we saw an increase in closure of businesses. And these are long-standing SMEs, and especially SMEs in wholesale and retail, where a majority of SMEs are, as well as food and accommodation. So I think this only adds to the spanner in terms of, the operations of your normal businesses. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a matter of grave concern for experts such as myself.
So what alternative do SMEs have, especially SMEs who rely on power as a way of, conducting their daily business production? What other option do they have?
Yeah, so if you look at the challenge with the way the SME ecosystem is in Kenya is you rarely have options. I would give you an example. Around 92% of SMEs are micro. So this means that these are SMEs with turnovers of between 0 to 500,000 annually. And the majority of them are informal, around 79%, and a majority of them are in very shock, in sectors that are very susceptible to shock. And this we're talking about wholesale and retail. So it's very difficult to give options for someone whose back is on the wall. But I think what we've tried to advise is for SMEs to move from sectors such as wholesale and retail and go towards manufacturing, which has more resilience, as well as agriculture, transport, and construction and real estate.
So then, because Ogola, I know that the fuel prices hike will hit SMEs the hardest, during this time, and that is something that even COTU has talked about. But let's talk about the impact of petroleum on the SMEs' growth here in the country.
Yeah, so now if you look, petroleum fuel is a big factor in terms of the structure of an SME, regardless of which of the sector that we are talking about. Of course, the transport sector will have the biggest brunt because fuel is a direct cost. But even for the rest of SMEs, in wholesale retail, there's an aspect of fuel or transport that is ingrained in their businesses. Remember, the SMEs already operate in very thin margins. So looking at, Marban data, we are looking at a 10% increase in terms of cost of fuel between December and January. So it means that if that is passed directly to SMEs in terms of fuel prices, that it means that either their profit margins would be reduced, and of course the implication would be they have to adjust their cost structure either by laying off or making other adjustments to ensure that they still are able to operate. But again, if you are to consider the other factors of COVID, taxes, then it means that the options that SMEs have are very, very much limited.
But if that will go that to Ogola, then that means it will affect their contribution to the tax collector and also in terms of growth within the SME sector, because the government, especially President Uhuru Kenyatta, has been so vocal when it comes to supporting the SMEs here in the country.
Exactly. And like I said, already SMEs have continued to struggle despite their enormous contribution to the economy at around 33% of GDP. Like I said, in a normal situation, we had 3 out of 5 SMEs shutting down within 3 years of inception in pre-corona environment. So bringing corona, we had an upward mortality of around 80–90%. And this is just corona plainly. Now, if you are to add taxes, the digital service tax, the minimum tax, etc., and add fuel, then you can imagine how the situation looks like. So, of course, the situation cannot be painted otherwise. It's very dire, and I think conversations must start in terms of how can we be able to backstop SMEs and give incentives for them to survive rather than accelerate their death.
All right, and as we bring this conversation to an end, Ogola, so what is the way forward for the SMEs as, the survival tactics during this time when the fuel prices have gone higher?
I think for me, the place I would look at it is from a budget policy statement perspective, where the National Treasury, is going through the budget-making process and is trying to, I think, in the process of developing the post-COVID-19 recovery strategy for SMEs. I think maybe if you are to look at it broadly in terms of that, that is where we should be able to see the kind of incentives that government would put in for SMEs, and assume that, the incentives that are going to be there are going to surpass these, fuel price increases and other shocks that SMEs are facing in Kenya.
All right, Victor Golan, SME expert, talking to us about the pain at the pump when it comes to the SMEs. You've also heard it from my colleague who's getting the sentiments of Kenyans, Emmanuel, to what Kenyans had to say about the higher fuel prices, which will affect the prices of basic commodities here in the country. Wait and see what the government will say, because COTU has spoken, about these fuel prices. So far, you're up to date with what is making the headlines. 9:59 a.m. on KTN News Center. Allow me to take a short commercial break, but when we come back, we shall be giving you that interview of Dr. Muhisa Kitui, who is a Kenyan politician and a 2022 presidential hopeful, who also served as the Secretary General of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development.